Hello, Brian. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. No problem.
Absolute pleasure. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. This is actually your second time on the show. Right. Okay. Good. Great. Well, thank you for coming
I do
back.
remember.
Great. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, in that case, let's stay off the topic of Kiss then, and we won't fall out. Um, so, okay, simple question right out the gate, really. What's the last 18 months been like for you and for the label?
Yeah, weird, right?
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah.
So strangely enough, for the label, it's been really good, which is kind of unusual. But I think what we're seeing is obviously we were down for 3 or 4 months. We weren't really sure what was going to happen, but 2020 ended up being a really, really good year for us, and 2021 so far is kind of repeating the same thing. I think a lot of that is due to the fact that the fans obviously aren't going to concerts, so they have some more money to spend, possibly, and they're spending it thankfully on music and supporting the bands and the label, which we couldn't be happier for. But that being said, it's obviously a struggle for the bands because they're most of their livelihood is going out on the road and touring, and not only just livelihood, just connecting with people and fans. And it's been we're still kind of seeing how all that's shaking out at this point. But yeah, it's been it's difficult, and it doesn't look like it's going to get a whole lot better anytime soon, which is a bummer. But
yeah,
we'll see.
At least we're starting to see some live shows. I mean, I'm playing Bloodstock in 2 weeks, so that's nice because we brought an album out. That's Acid Rain. We brought an album out at the end of 2019, and we played 4 shows, and we were all set to give 2020 our all. After it's taken us 29 years to release an album, and we release it, do 4 shows, and then there's a pandemic for the first time in 103 years.
Yeah. Good timing. I've seen that happen a lot. Yeah, we'll see how it goes over here in the U.S. Unfortunately, numbers are starting to go way up again, which is a bit disconcerting. But we have Psycho Fest out here in a couple weeks, so that'll be really the first show here in Vegas since all of this stuff happened. So we'll see how it goes over here. Tours are starting, but also numbers are going up again. So I don't know if that's going to mean that things are going to shut down again. I don't know. We're just kind of playing it by ear and hoping that things get better.
It's kind of weird as well, because I mean, ultimately the UK is, the size of one state, and with every state having kind of different laws and different ways of tackling it, it leads to even more confusion.
Yeah, and that's kind of the touring problem here is obviously the first big tour to cancel were Deftones and Gojira, just because they didn't want to get out of the road and have to cancel dates at the last minute, because you just don't know. Like, maybe it's okay in one state, but it's not okay in another state, and so that makes touring on that level really difficult. So we'll just have to see. It's just everybody's hopeful that it gets better, but right now, especially in places like California and Florida, it's not too good.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously it goes without saying that you have my sympathies. But funnily enough, our label was saying the same thing. Certainly in the first part of the pandemic, when it was absolute lockdown, they were saying that the response from fans and the volume of stuff they were shifting. I mean, the head of the label said to me, we've just had our best month for 16 years.
Yeah, it's similar here. I think you hear that story a lot, and also the bands that were able to get a bunch of merchandise out. Especially a lot of bands that were about to go out on tour. Like we had Black Dahlia Murder, Killswitch Engage, and Cattle Decapitation all put out records. Were about to go on the road, and obviously they got shut down. But they went through all their merch and more merch. So everybody's surviving at this point. Obviously, the live streams have been really cool. Killswitch is actually doing one this Friday, I think it is. So those are a way to kind of at least sort of keep with the fans.
Yeah, and I mean,
You can do it. Some people are doing cool things with them too.
well, yeah. Well, let's face it. Lamb of God have released it as a live album and a live DVD of a streaming show. So I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's the way forward.
Yeah, we're doing the same with Behemoth, by the way. I
Right.
think if you look at silver linings of all this stuff, I think one of them is I think these live streams are really cool, especially for fans, because you always get the complaints like, you're not coming to my town, you're not coming to my country, you're not, well, here we are. I've encouraged all the bands, like when you go out on the road now, because so many venues have the capabilities to do this and do this decently, to do the live stream. And that way, if you're in Montana or wherever, and you can't see the band, or even if they're playing in your town, you got to work or whatever, here's an opportunity for you to at least get a chance to see something, even though you're not there. It's at least partially good.
Yeah. Come to Chile. That's the one that's always in the comments. Yeah, because it's so easy.
Of course, get on a plane tomorrow, right?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. I mean, it was tough before all this shit happened, so it's just, yeah, it's crazy, but it's a good point you make there, because ultimately, we're kind of in a wartime situation. We're all at war with an unseen enemy. And as we all know from our history lessons at school, in times of war come great innovation. And I think that's what we're seeing within the music business, is people being forced to innovate, being forced to connect with their fans in different ways, try and drive revenues in different ways. And it is, it's definitely creating some interesting projects. I mean, when we get back to some kind of normality, do you think that's something that's just that is going to survive, or are we going to go back to the old ways?
I hope the streams survive. Like I said, I think it's a good way for bands to connect to fans that aren't able to go to the live shows. And I've talked to all the bands about it, and some definitely want to continue doing it. Some are, hesitant, but it's a good revenue stream for them, which is always helpful, because certainly all of our bands are, they're not, living in mansions and driving Ferraris.
Yeah.
So anything helps. And I think it's great for the fans too. And like I said, now there's ways you can do it. You can do it creatively. We've got some interesting ideas coming up, with some new albums coming out with a stream attached to it that's more than just a live show. And I think there's a lot of really kind of cool things that are coming out of this. So like I said, I'm trying to look at as many silver linings as you can. So
yeah, absolutely. And that's, I mean, and the thing is as the label head, that's what you have to do, because everyone's looking to you, aren't they? Really, and it comes from the top down. And if if you can get that message across to everybody that, hey, look, this isn't the apocalypse. There is plenty we can do. And like you say, and you say some bands are hesitant, but when you mention the words stable revenue stream, that hesitancy tends to kind of fade away a little.
Well, you also see what some of the other bands have done, and some of the revenue is phenomenal. So it's especially now, it's a really big help to a lot of these bands. So and so far the reaction from the fans has been really good too. So.
Yeah, and I've seen some cool ones. I mean, I've seen ones where people are essentially playing a gig without a crowd, but I've seen others where, I mean, I saw the Voivod one, which was really interesting. The fact that they'd gone back and done 2 really old albums, but they didn't put it out live. They produced it and added effects, and it was phenomenal. And the weird thing is, I thought it would bother me that it wasn't a live stream, and then the minute it starts, you're like, oh man, this is great.
Yeah, I think if you can add in a lot of production value to it, because we've seen that in some of the songs, like Behemoth is another good example of just doing something completely over the top. And it's like, was it live? No, but it was within a day or two or whatever it was. But the production value is so amazing that you need to have that extra time to make it perfect, so to speak. But yeah, I think that stuff is really cool. And I also love another thing that's come out of this that I think is really cool that I know a couple of our bands are talking about doing an album in its entirety, one time only. We'll do it one time only stream, an album in its entirety. We'll do a bunch of bundles for it. And I think that's really cool too, because if you have, I'm always a fan of bands doing classic albums in their entirety. it's difficult to get the bands to do that a lot of times, but I think for a stream, because it's a little bit more of a one-time only thing, you have to do it every night sort of thing. It's a little more, I don't want to say easier, but
No, hey, go ahead. Being in a band is not that difficult. I mean, but you're right. It does from a band perspective. It's like, okay, let's rehearse this. It's a one-off show, and we'll do it. I've been asked if we do if we'd ever do a tour dedicated to one old album. It's like, no, God, no. The thought of playing those songs back to back in the same fucking order we put them in when we were teenagers. No, thank you.
Yeah, and I totally get that on the band side too. I understand that, but I think as a fan, I love it when bands do that, and if this is another vehicle to make that happen, then I'm all for it.
Oh, I'm an absolute hypocrite. I love it when bands do it, apart from when I'm asked to do it, and then it's a stupid idea. But
totally understand, by the way.
Sorry.
Totally understand, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's kind of weird because ultimately people in bands are just serious music fans. I mean, that's why we're in bands, because listening wasn't enough. You wanted to get involved. You wanted to be able to climb inside the music and walk around and make your own instead of just listening. And then so it is really weird because it's literally down the middle. It's like I'd really want my favorite bands to do this, but if asked to do it myself, no, definitely not. Which, like I said, is very hypocritical, but at least I'm honest about it.
There you go.
Do you see a time where that side of the business of your particular business is going to build up? Do you think there will be any time where you would look, to start adding a kind of streaming service to the business, as in, you bring a band in and you say, right, okay, here's the album, and you don't need to go and get a separate streaming company. You don't need to get all these people involved. We can do it all, in one hub through the label.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about that. We've talked to various people over the course of the pandemic because we've all had extra time to do things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very possible. I think there were a lot of people talking about doing that and partnering with different people. It's kind of slowed down a bit now that we're getting out of it. So I don't know necessarily if the component would be specifically ours, but we might find a partner that does it, that knows how to do it. We'll see. I think that's kind of just a fluid thing at this point. But I am a big fan of the live streams, and I personally want to see them go on even as we get back to hopeful normalcy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it only takes a few releases, certainly within our genre. It only takes a few releases by big bands, the larger, to say, right, here's the vinyl, here are all the various packages, and here is another package with a VIP ticket to a stream, a one-off stream, week of release, day of release, whatever. And I think you see that 2 or 3 times and it will just trickle down. And, everybody, if they're able, will be saying, right, well, this is the new normal. We need to do that now.
Yeah, if you can do it right, absolutely. I think it's great.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of sort of DIY streaming things as well, which weren't terrible. It's not exactly a ringing endorsement. I get that, but however you get to see something, and in lockdown there was some really shitty live streams, but it was just something different to what it's not Netflix. That's basically fine. And I think
oh, sorry. I think too, just early on, people were kind of learning how to do this, and even the venues didn't have it quite together. And now that enough of these things have been done, and enough of the venues have it kind of together to do it, I think that lately the streams I've seen tend to be a little bit better than some of the early, even the DIY ones tend to be a little bit better.
Yeah. And during lockdown, during the height of it, how did you handle new releases? Did you just basically say to everybody, just let's hold on, take a step back, and we've got to rethink everything?
Pretty much, we kind of refocused what we did. Once we could start to manufacture things again, we kind of refocused and said, let's go back and let's start reissuing catalog. Let's start doing, cool vinyl variants and whatnot that we haven't done yet. It kind of, because we have a huge catalog, which we're lucky enough to have that we're able to go back in and kind of do cool things. So we did a lot of that because not only did we not want to put out new releases, the bands were like, we don't want to put out a record now and then tour on it, much later. But what we found, we eventually started putting out some new releases. I think the first couple big ones were Armored Saint and Fate's Warning, two bands that don't do a lot of touring anyway. And the records were already done. So we put those out and they had some of the biggest, I think both bands had the highest numbers they've ever had on the first week, highest chart numbers, highest everything.
Wow.
And we found, again, I think by waiting and not everybody's putting out records, and again, that the appetite for this stuff is so huge. And, a lot of people don't have a lot of stuff to do. So there's, they're aware of what's going on, thankfully. And so stuff did really well. But yeah, we still held on to releases. We still have a couple of releases that have been sitting around for a while that we're, going to put out probably later this year, just because the bands do want to be able to tour on it sooner than later.
Yeah, and that is a difficulty with that. I mean, speaking from experience, it's kind of like, do we write a new album in lockdown? And that means that the release that you've put out at the end of 2019 is never going to get toured, and it's going to get kind of lost.
That's a difficult one, and we're kind of dealing that a little bit with Cannibal Corpse, who put out one of their best albums ever, and they're not going to be able to tour on it for a while, but they've got a couple interesting things in the works. Hopefully, I'm going to see them in a couple of weeks, because they're supposed to be playing here at Slagel Fest, so it'd be good to see them. But yeah, it's difficult because then, like you said, how do you do that? You put out another record. I mean, we definitely, I think almost every single band in existence has all been writing and or recording now. So that's going to be, I think, coming out of this and hopefully in 2022 and obviously beyond that is, how do you, number one, how do you figure out all the touring to go out so it's not all out at the same time? And number two, how do you figure out the releases so there's not 100 releases coming out in a week? So
and I've got a number 3 for you as well. How do you make sure that you haven't got 5 albums by 5 bands all about isolation and viruses coming out?
Yeah, there's not much you can do about that. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of that, but I'm also hopeful that there's a lot of anger and angst coming out in a lot of this music too. So that always leads to good art, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Frustration and anger. Yeah, they're great. Well, like I say, great art comes from struggle. And if you're struggling through a pandemic, then yeah, the shit's going to go down. But I do see it, it's inevitable that there is going to be, a certain amount of, isolation, virus and all the rest coming out of it. And of course, all of the social issues that have been a knock on from this as well. I mean, I've had the experience, most people I know, I'm sure you might have had the experience where something like this happens and all of a sudden you find out that you've got some people who are have some interesting views on things and you never thought you'd hear stuff from them like this.
Unfortunately, absolutely. That'll happen. And it is what it is, I guess.
Everybody reacts to being shut in their houses by the government slightly differently, apparently. Some think it's for the greater good and others not so much. But again, it's a hell of a thing to live through and to navigate. You must get a certain amount of pride out of the fact that, well, do you know what, guys? If we can get through this, we can get through anything.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to kind of find a way to work things out, and it's been, like I said, it's been really weird for us as a label because, and really all the labels, because we've all done pretty well in this, and bands are struggling, and I have a lot of friends. It's just been such a weird thing because different areas have done really well. I have a lot of friends with business outside the music business that have done really well, and then other people like certainly performers and that sort of thing. It's been horrible for them.
Yeah.
Crew members, all this sort of stuff. So
absolutely.
It's another big issue that we're kind of talking about a lot now as these tours hopefully come back. Crews are incredibly difficult to find because a lot of these guys, obviously that was their career and they can't not work for 18 months. So they've taken other jobs and, in a lot of cases, they don't have to tour, they can stay home, they can be with their families. so they don't want to come back. So we're seeing that if anybody out there wants to be a crew person, now's probably a pretty good time to start, because a lot of jobs are going to be available in the next 6 months or so, hopefully.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I mean, one group of businesses that I really, really feel for who don't really naturally fall into this are the venues. Because bands can at least, we can repackage stuff, we can put merch out. Well, I mean, venues manufacture nothing. They literally just stand there and age and fall apart whilst having no revenue coming in.
Yeah, that's been a horrible, horrible problem all over the world. We got heavily involved with a couple of organizations here, Save Our Stages and stuff, that actually finally pushed through in the U.S. government a huge amount of money that went to all these venues to basically keep them to survive, because they're just sitting there empty for so long. I've talked, a lot of friends that run venues, I've talked to them, and they found different ways to stay alive. The streaming thing is one area where people have been doing that sort of stuff and doing whatever they can. But we're going to definitely lose a lot of really cool, we already have lost a lot of really cool venues around the world, which is a real bummer. But we're hoping, a lot of people are hoping that once things turn around, that other people will come in to own it and kind of continue the legacy going on. But we'll have to see. It's definitely a bit of a tenuous situation.
Yeah, and none of us know how this is going to shape down yet, because we're at different stages of it. I mean, we seem to be coming out of it. We're about 85% of the population vaccinated over here. But we're a small country, we're a small island. This is the thing about touring, and especially like we said earlier, touring North America. It's a real difficulty, but it's the same with any country at the moment, really. Because you can be touring through one country that's absolutely fine, but you can't roll through to the next country because everything's not fine.
Yeah, it seems what's happening here and a little bit in Europe too, but it's still early to tell. It's just festivals are going to be the big thing. Which is as long as they can run smoothly and stuff, it'll be good. I mean, look, the lineups for next summer over in Europe are just completely insane. So I'm hoping everything runs smooth and we can get back by then. And even over here, like I said, Slagel Fest here has a really good lineup. Unfortunately, a lot of bands had to cancel due to the fact that they couldn't get here from Europe, or people still might not want to travel. But
same things. I mean, the same things happened with Bloodstock. We've lost quite a few bands from outside of the UK. But then, of course, given how this whole scenario works, all of a sudden the regulations have just changed. So all of a sudden, I think you've got bookers at Bloodstock now going back to bands, who said oh no, it's you can't do it. And now the regulations have changed. Literally, I think about a day and a half ago. Now the UK will accept people from the US if they've been double jabbed. So if you're organizing a festival that starts in 2 weeks and all of a sudden you're going back to some bands and going, has everybody got 2 jabs? Just tell me everyone's got 2 jabs. It's like, yeah, right. Come back.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is. I mean, I'm glad I'm just doing the easy bit and playing on the stage. And that's another thing about this whole thing as well, is the constant changing of, because the virus is constantly changing. We keep seeing different strains, and as much as people complain that everything keeps changing, restrictions keep they're lifted, then they're not, and it's kind of like, well, the virus isn't playing ball. It's not just staying as one thing, and it's going to be around for a long time, I think.
Yeah, we're seeing that over here, where we kind of thought that we were kind of out of it a little bit, and then the new variants come, and then all of a sudden it's a much different thing. And it's over here, it's become a big political thing, which is beyond me, but it is what it is. So it's going to be a while. I agree. I don't know. Nobody can predict anything, and even in the midst of this stuff, just talking to people, if they say they know, they don't really know. No one knows.
Yeah, that's a really good maxim to live by. That is, yes. If they say they know, they don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because no one really knows. So we'll just, we're all hoping, things get better sooner than later.
Well, one thing I've heard, oh, when's it going to go away? Well, here's a clue. The last pandemic 103 years ago was flu. Has that gone away? No. So, it's another version of flu we'll all have to have our jabs for. And that's it really.
More than likely. I mean, the scientists, know way far more than I do. I talked to a few of them, and and it's just impossible to tell because other things have kind of come and gone, and this is not to get too scientific, but this is part of things that we've seen like SARS and H1N1, and
Yeah,
this is a different strain of that. And some of those did more or less go away, but yeah, again, like I said, if you think you don't really know. So.
absolutely. Did you? I mean, did you sign any new bands when you were in lockdown? And were you still getting people submitting stuff?
Oh yeah, we get stuff all the time. Obviously, I think even more during this time because these bands have more time to sit around and form and make new music. So yeah, we actually signed quite a few bands, mostly from Europe actually, more so than the States. So yeah, we've gone through and signed a bunch of new stuff, which some of it's coming out now, like Space Chaser, for example, which had a really good first week and a great reaction to their record so far. So yeah, it's I mean, I don't want to say business as usual because it's definitely not, but we're still trying to do what we do, and we're again, everybody's working from home, so they have more time to listen to things and search for bands and stuff. So yeah, we're still signing stuff. We have to be kind of somewhat careful at a certain point because you don't want to have too many bands, and we're kind of getting to that point now where you can only, with the staff, you can only have so many bands to really do a good job with. So we're trying to be real careful with not getting too crazy at this point. So we're slowing down a bit, but yeah, I think we signed, like I said, mostly in Europe. I think we signed like 5 or 6 new bands.
You signed a UK band. That doesn't happen very often.
I wish it did.
Oh, me too.
All my favorite bands are from the UK. So,
wow, really?
Well, yeah. I mean, going back to the '70s and stuff. Obviously,
Obviously,
Maiden, and I mean, the whole new wave of British heavy metal was the whole reason why I got into this in the first place. So.
Yeah. So you signed Cryptic Shift, I think. Yes.
Yep. Another of our European staff over there finding a bunch of cool stuff. So yeah, it's been fun. It seems like there's a really fun, cool underground, scene happening over in Europe again, which is always good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it might develop a little quicker as well, given, as you were saying, people having more time to be able to write, and also being a little bit further ahead than North America in getting vaccinated and getting things under control. It may well be that we've got a little bit more of a kind of scene going over here before you guys get fully back on your feet.
Yeah, and again, look at silver linings. It's like, hopefully some of these things lend to, there being more great music coming out just because everybody had time to kind of focus on that. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, as a business, and going through all this and having had a certain amount of success during this, it was interesting you were saying earlier that you have friends in businesses that have done really well and friends that have done really badly. Do you find it something that you don't want to be smug about? It's great, but it's something that you have to watch the company you're in before you say.
Well, yeah, I mean, 100%, because you do feel guilty sometimes that that you've been okay and other people haven't been. It's just that's common. The way it's the same. There's a name for it, but people who have been in earthquakes or fires or something, and their house stands and their neighbor's house doesn't stand, and it's like it's just kind of difficult. So it's a little bit different in this because you do. I think what a lot of people did is just kind of figured out a different way to do things, and maybe they got in a different business or they changed their business to somehow make it work here. But it's interesting because I spent some time in Key West, Florida, during all this time, just to Vegas, as much as I love it, it's very cold in the wintertime, and I don't like being cold. So Key West they had very little cases, and I just basically rented a house and had some of my friends were down there. We didn't really do much of anything, but I ended up meeting some people down there, and I found that all of them had done insanely well over the course of the worst part of the pandemic. Like, one of my buddies owns a bike shop. One of my buddies owns a wine store. And those things you would think like, okay, lockdown, we can't exercise, going to go get bikes. And certainly alcohol sales, of course, anybody in that industry, they might have done the best of everyone.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to find that stuff out. It seems to be that more people did well during all this than you would actually think.
Yeah.
So there is some resiliency there. At least that's positive.
Yeah, well, the thing is, human beings, we're strange creatures. Just when you think you can predict us, just when you think there's an algorithm for everybody, there's, the law of unintended consequences arrives. So in the UK, we have a massive housing boom. Property prices have gone through the roof, and people are putting their houses up for sale and they're selling them straight away, and no one saw it coming. No one predicted it. But
Same exact thing here.
Right. And I think it's basically people sat at home, do a lot of internalizing and a lot of examining, do we need to be here? Do we want to be here any longer? And I think stuff like that's fascinating, because as much as we try and predict human behavior, and like I said, especially with, an algorithm for everything, it's great to see the fact that we can still surprise people and come out with some just bizarre behavior that nobody was expecting.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. And the fact that everybody ended up on TikTok, again, nobody saw that coming, apart from the Chinese government, probably well in advance. But so you got out of Vegas and into Key West. Pleased for you, because I'm
back in Vegas now.
Right.
I was there for, I don't know, maybe I went down there a couple of times for a few weeks, like in the winter time when it was really, really cold here and really nice there. It's a beautiful part of the world.
Well, I was going to say, and because we've talked about your business, but personally, how did you get through the worst part of it? I mean, other than going to Key West.
Yeah. Honestly, sports probably was I'm a big sports fan. So
me too.
Ice hockey. I mean, ain't really anything. And if it wasn't for a lot of that stuff, I probably would have gone kind of crazy during all this, but especially, I mean, I'm a huge ice hockey fan. So when the season was going, even when they're in the bubble up there, I mean, I watched every single game. So there's something to do every day and something to focus on as opposed to everything else. So that stuff definitely helped hugely. I think it would have got a little crazier had I not been able to watch all of that. So that was, and I try to watch as much of that stuff as I can anyway, but in back in normal life, you just don't have time. So I just took it as like, okay, here's a time where I can actually watch all this stuff. And luckily the games were really good. And
it's the same over here. I mean, basically the broadcasters made every single game available. So normally when I'm talking about like, soccer, the Premier League, normally only selected games will be shown live over a weekend, and then they'll have highlights packages. But during lockdown, it was just like, right, every game. So you could literally, you could watch a game nearly every night, which was just heaven. I'm actually going to miss it, which is a bit sick, really. But I am actually going to miss it. But you'll appreciate this as a sports fan. During the pandemic, when we were right in the midst of it, football had come back, and it was in empty stadiums, obviously. And I saw my team get promoted back to the English Premier League for the first time in 16 years. So it was a one-person party around my house that day, and I did have neighbours wanting to know if I was all right. I was like, yes, I'm happy. But I mean, I've spent 16 years. I went to the last game we played in the Premier League. I went to the ground, and it was it was a very sad occasion. It was basically like 35,000 people being at a funeral, and And then 16 years later, I'm sat in my flat on my own, watching us finally get promoted back to the division where we think we belong. And it was just such a mixture of emotions, you know. It was like I was happy, I was elated, I was on my own. I started thinking about all the people that I've lost since, you know, it's like my father would have loved to have seen us go back up, lost him 10 years ago. And it's that power of sport, I think, you know.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's why it was really important for all these sports leagues to play, even in a pandemic, even in front of, you know, even in empty arenas and stadiums and stuff. It's important for just a distraction for people. You know, it's the same thing. You know, if you're not a sports fan, all my friends watch, you know, every movie and every TV show, and
Yes.
definitely distractions were a huge help, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, well, the UK government was just like all on to try and get sport back, because it is, you know, whether you like it or whether you're not, I have this argument all the time. Hey, it's a music podcast and fuck it, let's talk about sport. It's the unifying power, you know. It's you know, the old "it's just a game" argument. I'm afraid that just doesn't wash. It really doesn't.
Look, I get it. You know, I trust me. I have a lot of friends who are not sports fans at all. I say, I don't know, 80% of all musicians are not sports fans whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there are a lot who are. And, you know, I did a podcast for 3 years with my friend who runs NHL.com, and we talked to athletes about metal. And it was super fun to do, because I didn't realize how many of them are metal heads. Not as many as there used to be, but there still is quite a few. So it's always fun to have my two worlds collide, you know, like being a fan and then actually, you know, interviewing some of these guys and later becoming friends with a bunch of them too. So it's crazy.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I'm totally jealous. Because there's, I mean, literally, you can count the amount of metal sports people who've come out as metalheads. You can count them on one hand over here, and ain't none of them talking to me. I've tried, but yeah, you know, it is that unifying power, and especially during the times that we've been through, to have anything that you can just feel like you're connected to it. You know, just to have something. I mean, were you on your own during the pandemic?
Yeah, pretty much. I had two friends here. One of my friends, Lizzie Borden, who lives down the street from me here in Vegas, and we would all get together once a week on Saturday to watch the UFC. Well, before the UFC, we would just get together and go down a rabbit hole of, you know, pick a band, you know, Iron Maiden or, you know, whatever it was, and just, you know, go down a rabbit hole watching different stuff. But that was really it. Otherwise, yeah, I was pretty much on my own. I saw, you know, a select group of friends here and there that, you know, I knew were being safe and stuff. But yeah, pretty much, yeah, just by myself for the most part.
Yeah, same here. And I have to say, I think, I don't know, there's as regards mental health, I'm sure it's had, you know, an effect on me somehow. But I kind of feel like I'm sort of, I got through it okay. At least I hope so.
Yeah, I think so too. You know, one thing that was kind of fun that I did, obviously, you know, I talk to a million people every day, and, you know, definitely there are a lot of people that were struggling pretty heavily. I had some friends that really were struggling, that, you know, trying to help out as much as possible. But at some point it kind of became a little bit fun. Like I was doing these Instagram live feeds where I just, you know, I just want to see my friends. So it was, whether it was, you know, Corpse Grinder from Cannibal Corpse, or Adam from Kill Switch, or, you know, Johan from Amon Amarth, just that we just get on and say, hey, we can see each other, and just talk for, you know, about an hour or so and interact with people. So that was really fun. Another kind of, you know, one of these weird silver linings of the whole thing. I never would have had time to do that beforehand, but
yeah, I'm exactly the same. I did the same thing, except on our Facebook page every Saturday we'd do a show. You know, and I'd get some guests on. We had James Murphy, we had Bobby Gustafson. We just getting people on and just having a chat. And one thing I found, I don't know if you found this, in the comments, normally it's like, you know, stupid questions, and then people start arguing, and, you know, and it's like, come to Chile and all that. what I found was it was people were just like, oh my God, thank you so much for doing this. This is the closest thing I've had to a night out for years, you know.
Yeah, 100%. Like the comments were all great. I did a few Facebook things as well, and those were really super fun. And everything was positive. And yeah, I think people were just, so desperate to interact with anybody. You kind of you definitely didn't see the like you said, the crazy, come to Chili's sort of thing.
So did you discover any new music during lockdown?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I'm always looking and listening to new stuff, but I do that. It's weird. Like I do that kind of for bit. I mean, I love it. I love, checking out new stuff and hearing new bands, but I have two modes in my brain. That's like the business brain mode, and then just I'm a fan mode. Yeah. So I discovered a lot of really cool stuff that I'd never seen before. Like a lot of, old footage of, for example, like Alice Cooper, some stuff that I'd never seen before from the early 70s. And because like I said, I do these, just deep dives usually on YouTube and just go down and try to find stuff. And I'm a big collector, so I found a couple of let me see how to describe this the right way. Live music CDs that people put out that may or may not be legitimate.
But, are you trying not to say the word bootleg?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, good job you didn't say it.
Yeah. But I found a lot of that stuff out there that's really cool, and there's been a lot of, I did the same thing. Like, there's been a lot of repackaging of classic albums and stuff that I've been able to get to spend more time listening to. Like, Waters has done a great job on all these Black Sabbath reissues with just tons and tons of extra content, and so that's having extra time to do that was really helpful. And one thing that I did too, that kind of back to the how did you survive all this sort of stuff. So when everything was completely dead and you weren't allowed to really walk outside your door or anything, I've been starting this Metal Blade Museum idea that I had a while ago, because we just have all this stuff. Like, what do we do with all this stuff? Like, let's just put it somewhere so people can see it. So I started it in a house out here, and just for fun. And then I started having people over, and they really liked it. And then, guys like Charlie Benanti came over and posted it on social media, and everybody's like, where can we see this? So we kind of got the idea to actually get an actual, space here in Vegas to put that together. So for basically that 3 or 4 months, I went to work there every day and just started putting the whole thing together. So we still don't know when it'll be available for the public to see with all this stuff going on. But we're hopeful that next year, 2022, is our 40th anniversary. So we're hopeful that by then we'll be able to really do some fun stuff with it.
That's amazing, and that's a fantastic idea as well. I mean, because I know the feeling. It's like I bet you have people come over and they see some stuff that you have, and it's like, oh my God, this is incredible. This should be in a museum. And it's like, yeah.
That was kind of the idea. And I thought, oh, why not? I mean, we just have so much stuff, and everybody I talk to loved the idea. So, the few people that have seen it so far really like it. So I'm pretty excited to eventually get it out there for people when we can.
Well, also talking of the re-releases and expanding the editions, it would be remiss of me not to mention Motorhead, because I host the official Motorhead podcast, the Motorcast, and some of the reissues that BMG have been doing of the Motorhead stuff are just absolute class. They really are.
Yeah, I just got the No Sleep to Hammersmith, which is amazing, and there's all this extra content and amazing stuff.
Yeah, the Ace of Spades one is phenomenal. I've
got all of them.
Oh, have you really?
Oh yeah.
Oh, brilliant! That Ace of Spades box. That is not something that goes on a shelf easily. That is a one weighty thing. There's so much in it.
Yeah, those, the Metallica, the Sabbath, they're so big. You almost have to put them on. I'm putting them on top of all my album collections.
Yeah, you can work out with them. Just get one in each hand, and that's it. Job done. Well, look, Brian, this has been awesome, but I'm not going to let you go yet, because I have some great questions for you from subscribers. Now, we may have covered some of the topics, but there is some great questions in here. So would you do me a favor and just hang around a few minutes?
Of course.
Brilliant. Okay. So, well, look, thank you for now. That's the main bit out the way. Okay. So that's the tough bit. Now it's the really easy bit, which is some great questions from people who aren't me. Right. First up, we have. Right. We kind of touched on this, but Paul Hutchings would like to know, what has been the biggest thing that you have learned from the past 18 months?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I guess just the resiliency of people when put in a really difficult situation, like we talked about, how do you survive? How do you pivot your business or your whatever it is to make sure that things work? And I've been really impressed by how more people than I thought did better than I thought. And certainly as a company, we did far better. And even the bands they're struggling, but I think, everybody's kind of figuring out a way to make it work. So because at first we were like, how is everybody going to survive this? And we are still surviving it, hopefully not much longer.
Yeah. But, and you make a really good point there as well. I'm struggling. I'm sure there are, but I'm struggling to think of other genres where fans are literally going out there and spending their money to help the bands out because they know they're having a bad time. It's the wonderful thing about this community that we call metal. Yeah,
100%. And I've always learned over the course of time that the metal community has just been phenomenal. At all times, even the darker times of when metal was kind of out of it for a minute, and the underground was always really strong, and during all the file sharing stuff, it's always been such a great community. So I wasn't overly surprised that everybody kind of came to help as much as they could.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so another question from Carl. Paul did have some other questions. None were as good as that one, which is a great question. But we covered the rest on the other questions. Carl says, you started off listening to the new wave of British heavy metal, then quickly discovered Maiden. He's obviously doing your biography for you here. Do you listen to new releases such as AC/DC Power Up and the new Iron Maiden album that's going to come out soon?
Oh God, yes. I'm still as big a fan of all those bands as I ever was. In fact, the last Iron Maiden album, Book of Souls, is one of my favorite Iron Maiden albums. I'd put it, maybe not top 5, but close to top 5. And the Red and the Black is certainly in my top 10 all-time Maiden songs. I love it. Power Up was an unbelievable record. I'm a huge AC/DC fan. They were one of my favorite bands growing up, and always been a big fan. I've been lucky enough to meet Brian Johnson on a couple of occasions. We worked with him. He actually did a song on the comedian Jim Brewer did a record with us, and Brian sang on it, which at that time was the last thing he'd ever done. So I got to meet him a couple of times, and I know a lot of the story behind what really went on in that whole camp, and to have him come back to the band, because he's such an amazingly nice human being, just really incredible. And to have him come back and the whole band come back together and then make this unbelievable album. It came out, I mentioned Key West before, and it came out one of the times I was in Key West for a couple of weeks. And I listened to that album, I don't know, countless 4 or 5 times every day. I just couldn't believe how great it was. So yeah, I'm always a huge fan of any of those bands that put out new music. I mean, it's I think most of them have done a pretty good job. Even the last Metallica record, I think, is great. So it seems like a lot of the bands, the older bands are coming out and putting out really good music again, which as a fan makes me really happy.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you on Book of Souls. I mean, that is without doubt to put out your first double album that deep into your career, and for it to be as good and consistent as it is a minor miracle, really.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And yeah, I'm when you were saying about listening to Power Up 5 or 6 times a day, I was thinking, yep, there was stuff that came out that forever, whenever I hear songs from albums, I'll go, that was a lockdown album. Yeah, that was 2 or 3 times a day. That was like, when I was on a run or, whatever. Well, you've answered quite a few follow-up questions there, because there was some follow-ups about, what do you think is the quality of their material? if you had a chance to work with any of, I think I know the answer to this. If you had a chance to work with any of these legacy bands, how would you make their music and product more relevant to today's music business? Or do you think they're doing a good job as it is? Can I preempt you and say you'd love to work with AC/DC and you think they're doing a great job as it is?
Yeah, and Iron Maiden. Yeah. I mean, look,
Yeah.
I mean, would it be great to work with all of them? Of course, but it's also fun just to be a fan and kind of do it that way and not have the pressure. Because the one thing for me is like working with people that you've known for a long time, that you're friends with, and then you start working with them. That's an incredible amount of pressure. So I almost would not want to work with any of those bands because I'm friendly with a lot of them and I'm a fan of theirs, and just the pressure would be insane. Just to give you an example, like Killswitch Engage are extremely good friends of mine. Their managers are some of my best friends, and I've been friends with them for so long. And when it came up, when they were a free agent, I guess, we put in an offer that wasn't spectacular, I didn't think, but they came with us anyway, and it was both great and terrifying at the same time, because now it's like, if I screw this up, how is this going to affect my friendship with them? And also, I don't want to do a bad job for them because they're good friends of mine. So luckily, it all worked out okay. But that's terrifying. So I would almost rather not.
Yeah, no, I absolutely get that. And also there is a certain amount of, do I really want to see behind the curtain of the new AC/DC album? I want the fan experience of it just like arriving and me not knowing what it's going to be like.
Yeah, absolutely. As like I said, as a fan of stuff like that, I've had an opportunity a couple of times to work with some bands that I'm a huge fan of, and it's, like I said, it's just terrifying. It's like it's really nice that they think that way, but it's also like, God, if we do this, it's scary.
Yeah, I know what you mean, because the first question in the back of your mind is just like, what if I fuck it up? So we've got here. You stated that this is all Carl, by the way. You stated you have an eclectic mix of musical taste, which is why the roster on the Metal Blade label was so eclectic. Do you still have that same passion for eclectic taste in music? And could you give us some examples of kind of either end of the spectrum that you listen to?
Sure. I mean, look, I'm a rock and metal guy, so I'm not listening to country or pop or any of that sort of stuff. I mean, sometimes I'll have jazz in the background if I'm doing something, but predominantly it's all rock and metal. But I do, I run the gamut of, I love, obviously that super heavy stuff, but I'll give you an example of a band that is an English band actually that I'm a massive fan of, the Manic Street Preachers, and they're not really a metal band per se. They're definitely a rock band, but they've got some heavy stuff. But I've always been a huge fan of theirs, and just think all the stuff they've done is just brilliant.
That's really cool. Thank you. Not that I'm in the Manic Street Preachers, but thanks for the great answer. This is an interesting one, actually. What are the advantages and disadvantages of producing music on CDs, vinyl, and cassettes as opposed to streaming and downloading?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down. Well, there's two things. So streaming is just the ease of it. You can listen to it anywhere. You don't have to, take a gigantic music collection with you, or even anything. You just listen to it anywhere. It's very simple. It's easy to in a corporate way consume the music. So that's great. But certainly vinyl and to a certain degree CDs as well. Just the quality of the music is better on those, especially vinyl. I mean, especially for metal, you just can't. There's that warmness that you get when you listen to vinyl that you just don't get anywhere else. So I think people ask, well, what about all people buying vinyl? Is it going to stick around? Is it going to go away? And I think people have now kind of figured out, certainly in our world, and I think in a lot of other places too, that just music on vinyl just has it's just a better experience. There's a real stereo. There's real big speakers. All that sort of stuff. So I think that's the main difference. I mean, I'm a consumer, so I'll buy the CD, the vinyl, and also stream it. So I do all of the above. But I think those are the kind of the real qualities of why people do things differently. Why people only stream or only do this and that. I mean, I have friends that swear by CDs, and only will listen to CDs, and they won't even listen to vinyl. So that's because they think that sounds better there. So.
Well, I'm right with you. I'm right with you, Brian. I'm vinyl in the house, CD in the car, digital on the move. That's that's so there's no reason why you can't just enjoy it all. Now this is an interesting one. When a band signed to your label, what would you do for them that would enable them to get their best performance?
Well, I think what we strive to do, and I think we've done a pretty good job at Metal Blade, is everybody that works for the company are all humongous music fans. We all get along. It really is a big family, and that's kind of when we sign a band, we kind of welcome you into the family. And what we try to do is just make them comfortable and in a good environment. We're not pressuring them. We're not telling them what they should sound like or what they should do or any of those things. We're just trying to help them, guide them along and answer questions. And we have just such a really amazing staff that does such a great job. And we're all friends. It's like it's a big community of just everybody's friendly. Everybody likes each other. I mean, some of my best friends are all the guys in the bands on the label. So I think that if you give them a nice foundation like that, where it's friendly and everybody's a fan and everybody wants the best for them, then hopefully that'll put them in an environment where they can be creative and make great art.
And that's exactly what happened to me as a teenager signing with Music for Nations. It was exactly that. They were all really friendly. We used to hang out outside the office. And if you had a question, they'd answer it. It wasn't about being proactive and offering you advice that you didn't ask for. It's just about support, because artists are invariably needy creatures, and we need support. We need telling that what we're doing is great and that we're on the right track. And maybe if you just lean left a little, that would help. That's exactly what we need.
Yep, 100%. And I have a great respect for the late, great Martin Hooker, too, who ran Music for Nations. So we did a lot of work. We licensed a lot of stuff to him and hung out with him a lot, and just a really good, real music guy.
He was a lovely man, and what broke my heart was that I was the only musician at his funeral. Yeah. I couldn't believe it. There was a lovely note from Lars that was read out, and he without doubt he wanted to be there. And Dee Schneider sent a really cool letter as well. But he was late and great. He was a wonderful man and great fun, great company. Company. So the stories we should off the podcast we could tell some great Martin Hooker stories. Right. This is still Carl. If this isn't so much questions, it's more a list. If money and time were no object, what would your ideal box set vinyl collection look like?
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. almost too difficult to say. I mean, wow, that would be interesting. I guess on a Metal Blade front, it would always be fun to go back and do like a box set of all the Metal Massacre albums, but it's impossible because we don't have the rights to any of that stuff, and it would that's why you say money and time, because time, it would literally take probably 20 years of a team of people to try to figure all that out. But that'd be fun on the Metal Blade side of things. And then, I don't know, I guess, I mean, I own every piece of Iron Maiden vinyl there is. So, I mean, maybe there's something out there that's sitting around that doesn't exist.
Right.
Or some live shows that don't exist or something. I don't know.
Well, you did a great job with a very difficult question, because the questions I dread in interviews are like, what are your top 3 favorite thrash albums? And I'm like, oh God, really? It's like, you got to warn me with these questions, and the 3 that I would tell you today, it'll probably be another 3 the following day, or the same 3 but in a different order. I mean, there's just so much great stuff out there. Yep. Well, you did a really good job with that question, my man. Right, Carl's final question, you'll be pleased to know. Which bands do you think saved metal in the 90s?
Well, first and foremost, you gotta give it out to Pantera, because Pantera was,
Hell yeah.
at that point really the only mainstream metal band, and they were definitely flying the flag big time for metal. So
Yeah.
I think that if it wasn't for them, who knows? I mean, they certainly were number one. Metallica was still out there being Metallica, even though people kind of you know were saying whatever about Load and Reload. I actually like those records, and look, live they were great. They were always great. They played all the hits, and they were still playing stadiums and arenas when and still being a metal band basically when it wasn't cool. But I think Pantera far and away was the one that definitely, certainly in the U.S., that if they weren't around, it probably would have got a lot worse.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think they were the standard bearers. They were a kind of, and the fact that it was so aggressive, I think that was key, because it was almost like a direct opponent to grunge and everything else that was going on. And I'm going to throw in for kind of helping keep thrash alive. I don't know. I mean, they started out bigger over here. Is Machine Head?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, there was a lot. I always stress to people that the 90s produced a lot of really great metal music. People kind of, because it was underground and because, it wasn't mainstream, and a lot of people don't listen to that stuff. But like even on our end, like, yeah, right, Machine Head 100%. And, bands, I mean, there's so many great bands, Testament, all that stuff was doing really well there. And even on the Metal Blade front, like Cannibal Corpse, 6 Feet Under, Merciful Fate, King Diamond, all had releases that did really, really well. And I think are really great records that now are kind of getting the love, I guess, that they probably should have. But yeah, there was a lot. The underground scene, I think, in the 90s was really good. It just wasn't mainstream, and everybody thought it was kind of dead because nobody wanted to talk about it.
Yeah. And I've just thought of another one as well, System of a Down.
Yeah.
Who again broke mainstream and sold shit tons of records.
Rage Against the Machine too. I mean, Morello's a massive metalhead, and they were certainly doing something a little bit different, but they weren't. But they were at least doing something.
Device has lost connection to the internet.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, that's great. That was an excellent answer, my friend. We have right. This is interesting. So this is a follow-up question on the same thing. Which bands that started in the 90s never got the recognition they deserve and split up or disbanded that could have been in today's musical climate if they had pushed through the difficult period and continued?
It's a good question. I mean, there are a lot of bands that kind of still somewhat exist. One band that I really, really love, that I still love their records, it was a band called Sacrifice from Canada. That thrash band that I think could have had a lot of, definitely could have been a bigger band than they were, like time frame wise. And I mean, really the biggest for me personally, and obviously they're on the label too, but Armored Saint was a band that I think if Civil Salvation would have come out in 1989, I think that band would have been huge. But it came out in 1991, and then it got leveled by everything that was happening. Another band that's kind of off the beaten track that also had a bit of the same structure was Galactic Cowboys, who were another great band that kind of came out. Late 80s, early 90s. King's X is kind of in the same ballpark, although they did some stuff in the 80s, but kind of had the 90s kind of took everything away from them, and then kind of just went away.
And I was amazed by that, because for me, one of my favorite King's X album came out in the 90s, Dogman, which is a phenomenal record. But it just came and went. Hardly anybody knows that record at all.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where wrong place, wrong time, which is a bummer, because I agree, that record's phenomenal.
Yeah, and the production, oh man, it still stands up today. The bottom end.
And O'Brien, who also did the new AC/DC.
And has that man ever done a bad production? I mean, I think I love everything he's ever done.
Yeah, and he's a great guy too. So.
Well, maybe one day I'll get to work with him. Alexa, lights on. It's getting dark over here. Oh, hello again. Right, here we go. You're in the home straight now here, my friend. So this question is from Nick Russell. Any respectable metal fan from the 80s should have at least 50 plus Metal Blade albums in their collection. I'm near to 100, I think. Looking at the 80s onwards, can you name, in your view, the most important album for each decade you released? Oh, man.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for buying that many and having that many Metal Blade records. I appreciate that. Actually, it's a fairly easy answer.
Oh, right. Okay.
So in the 80s, it has to be, in the 80s, for me, it has to be Metal Massacre, just because that's the first thing that started it all off, and obviously started, the careers of a lot of pretty big metal bands. So I think that's the most important, certainly for the label in general, and just it was kind of a big start just in general for the metal scene in the U.S. In the 90s, I have to go back to my aforementioned Armored Saint Symbolville Salvation album, just because it's one of the most important records that I've ever worked on. I think it's an amazing record. The story behind it is incredible. Just everything about that record is really cool, and the band continuing on to do really well today is awesome. So I will say that. So now the 2000s, that's going to be difficult for me. I guess I'll go with the Monomart Twilight of the Thunder God, only because that was it's a huge record, obviously, for them and for us, and kind of the culmination of the second wave of metal coming out in the 2000s and kind of do it. So I would probably go with that one.
Cool. Wow. Excellent. Well done. And in the near 40 years of Metal Blade, what would you say was the most important period for metal, for the label and for metal as a whole?
Well, I guess it would have to be the 80s, just because that's really where it all started. And it started, obviously we signed and worked with so many great bands in the 80s, and the 80s were, aside from the 70s, probably the most important time for metal. I mean, obviously, so many incredible bands came out of the 80s, and we were lucky to work with quite a few of them. So yeah, certainly the 80s have to be the most important time. It was also just it was fun, but not so much fun at the same time, because it was, it's all starting out new, and, we kind of had an us against the world attitude, and it was great. But then, we kind of started to lose bands to the majors, and, we hoped that they would have success, and they didn't have as much. So that part was bittersweet, but definitely the 80s were the most.
Do you know what? That you've just reminded me of something Martin Hooker said to me way back in the day when I was on the label, and we were talking about thrash, and I said, well, thrash as a whole, do you think it can survive and flourish, as a genre and all the rest of it? And his reply was, it'll be fine as long as the majors don't fuck it up.
Yep. That's I think I've said the same thing many times.
Yeah. And this is good. Are there any bands you had the chance to sign but didn't, and anyone that you did sign at the time and then came to regret?
No, I don't really have any regrets about signing any bands. I think for better or for worse, I'm happy with all the stuff that we put out, and whether it did as well as it didn't, is what it is. But yeah, so I talk about this in my book about a couple bands that got away. People always ask me what the bands that got away or you didn't sign. There's a few. Guns N' Roses was one where they were playing in LA everywhere, and their manager was a good friend of mine. The guy that was doing their demos was a good friend of mine. You got to go see them. You got to go see them. You got to see them. And I'm not a fan of glam at all. And I just, from the pictures and everything, I just thought they're a glam band. So I'm like, it's not really interested. So then, of course, Appetite for Destruction comes out, and it's like, oh my God, this album is incredible. So we actually ended up doing a lot of marketing promotion for the record, because I had friends at Geffen, and they didn't know what to do with it when it came out. We said, we'll get it to all the underground people. So I went to a Iron Maiden Seventh Son of a Seventh Son album release party in LA, and I knew Guns N' Roses manager because he used to work at our distributor years ago, and also some friends of mine knew Slash. So I ran into Slash, and we became fast friends, and we had a few adult beverages, and towards the end of the evening, he finally asked me, he said, how come you never came to see us? And I said, I thought you guys were a glam band, and I didn't like glam. He's like, I hate that people thought that. So it was pretty funny. And then the other one was, I mentioned Pantera earlier, and their managers were really good friends of mine. I knew who the band was because he used to do a radio show in Dallas on a station called Z-Rock that was an all-metal station. And they would always call in and whatnot. Super good guys. But they came to me with Cowboys from Hell. and said, we have this record and we're looking for a deal. At the time we were at Warner Brothers, so we had a little bit more money to play around with. But they wanted a bunch of money, and I just at the time thought, I don't know, that might be a little bit too much for us, but we probably should have done it. But I think they went on and had a decent career anyway. So.
Yeah, I don't think it held them back too much.
No, I don't think it would have changed anything.
Yeah. And the thing, I totally respect the no regrets answer as well, because I think there's like, no band wants to hear somebody from a label saying, yeah, gee, I wish we'd never signed those guys. And you also open yourself up to the, oh, really? Well, maybe it was your fault argument as well.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Yeah. And it's funny. I just remembered we were talking about vinyl earlier, and you were saying about how it sounds best and all the rest of it. And one thing I heard, which I really, really agree with, is that someone said, look, original formats don't die, and it doesn't matter what you apply that to. Look at cinema. Cinema still exists. Videos were going to kill the cinemas. Streaming was everything was going to, DVDs, Blu-ray, everything was going to kill the cinemas. Nope. People still want to go there. And everybody said it was, vinyl's going to die. No, original formats don't die. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. And one last thing I wanted to mention as well, completely out of the realm of metal blade, but not maybe completely, but I, for a man who's 51, really enjoyed quite a bit of new metal that came out when the new metal scene came out, and I think it kind of reinvigorated the scene. I think it's always important that we have new genres coming through, that are pushing things. And personally, I think we're due another one. And they're not always great. Rap metal, funk metal, no thanks. But Brian is shaking his head for audio listeners. But with new metal, again, original formats, originators of these subgenres never die as well. Korn is still going, put out a great record last time around. Linkin Park, okay, they're not still going, but and as much as people might be anti these genres at the time, they bring people to metal, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, and there's always interesting things. There's a subgenre going on right now called Synthwave that's like kind of part metal and part EDM, and I'm not an EDM dance guy at all. And at first I was kind of like, I don't really know, but I've listened to some of the stuff, and we've signed a couple of bands, the Igor, a couple other bands that are kind of similar to that. And it's really kind of interesting because it's bringing in a fresh new sound to it, really. And you're kind of getting people that wouldn't normally be into metal that are coming over. And a lot of these guys in that world, unbeknownst to me, are huge metalheads. I one night got to meet and hang out with Paul Oakenfold, who is a huge in EDM, and he was telling me that he's a huge Metallica fan, and he was talking about how he's taken some of the stuff that Metallica has done and incorporated in what he does. And it was really kind of interesting because I super nice guy, and I kind of asked him like, so I was like, I don't really understand this music. What's the difference between a good DJ and not? So he kind of explained it to me. That made me kind of understand a little bit more about how it worked. But yeah, he followed Metallica around on tour for a while. So
that's amazing. That is amazing. It's the last guy that you'd expect to be into metal.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as for Igor, that the most recent album, that was a lockdown classic for me. That was unbelievable because it was just like, as you sort of alluded to, I heard bits and pieces and thought, I'm not quite sure what to make of this. And then I heard that album and I was just like, do you know what? I don't know what the fuck this is, but I know it's good and I like it.
Exactly.
And that's all that counts at the end of the day. Look, Brian, this has been awesome. I can't thank you enough. I really, really do appreciate you taking the time to have a chat with some nobody in England. It's been a blast, and I look forward to the hat trick and getting you on again in a few years' time.
Sure, always fun. And come on, you're in a legendary metal band, so don't.
That's very kind of you to say so. I'm looking forward to playing a live festival. That's it. You know, just one gig. That's all I want. One gig. Thanks a lot, dude. It's been an absolute pleasure. And you know, metal is safe in your hands. And just, you know, keep doing what you do.
Thanks. And yep, that's what I'm going to do.
Good. Okay. See you later, man. Take care.